Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Miranda and I am the Enchantress of Avalon. So for today's video, we are doing something slightly different. It's a little bit gothic romance and it's certainly a little bit fairy lore. I am doing a video on one of my own personal theories on an interpretation of Snow White. And I'm not the only one with this theory. I actually did write a blog post about this that I will link in the description box below. I posted that last week, I believe. So this interpretation of Snow White is that Snow White was, in fact, a vampire all along. Now, great writers like Neil Gaiman took that concept and ran with it. Neil Gaiman famously published a story called Snow Glass Apples, and it is the Snow White story told from the perspective of the wicked stepmother. And it turns out she wasn't wicked and she wasn't an evil, queen all along. She was just a woman who had a vampire stepdaughter. Yeah. It's fun. It's really great. And if you read the graphic novel version, it's really beautiful. Now, I actually have the exact same, the original Grimm's story in two different collections. In the Beauty and the Beast collection, which is very pretty. They're Barnes & Noble, fancy, leather-bound, gilt-edge ones. So I have this version, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs by the Grimm's Brothers in that, and it's obviously also in the Grimm Fairy Tale collection. And the Grimm Fairy Tale collection, I believe, has some illustrations. Yes, that is the evil queen looking in the mirror. Then we have the dwarves. I don't know if there's... Oh, yes, here. This is the one I was looking for. This is Snow White when she has fallen under the sleeping curse. Or was it a sleeping curse? And that's what I want to talk about with the vampire thing today. Traditionally, a traditional reading of Snow White is that she was, this beautiful young princess who was the fairest of all in her land, and she was so loathed by her stepmother for her beauty, because she was more beautiful than her stepmother was, that she sent a huntsman off into the woods with Snow White to kill the girl and bring me back her heart and her liver. But the huntsman had too much goodwill in his heart and he couldn't kill this young girl. So instead, he butchers an animal and he brings back the heart and the liver of the animal. And then Snow White happens upon a house that is owned by seven dwarves, and they give her sanctuary in return for her taking care of their home. And they work in mines of some sort. And eventually, after multiple tries, in the Grimm story, it's not just an apple, it's multiple tries. There is a cursed corset that frees her, that takes all of the breath out of her lungs. There is a cursed comb that gets stuck in her scalp. And then finally, there's the apple. And each of the previous attempts, the dwarves came in before and were able to, before it was too dire, and were able to undo the magic by cutting her out of the corset and taking the comb out. But the apple, a piece of it lodged in her throat, and they couldn't see it. They didn't know what was going on. So they had to just kind of put her in this coffin, and they left her in this coffin for some time. They didn't know what to do, but they didn't have the heart to bury her. So they had this beautiful glass coffin made where they could still look upon her beauty, as she didn't actually age or decay because she wasn't fully dead. And then one day, the prince is riding through the town and happens upon the glass coffin, and he's obsessed with her immediately. And, I must have her. I must have her. And convinces the dwarves to let him take her. And then his men are very careless with the coffin, and they drop it. And when they drop it, the piece of apple dislodges from her throat, which is what allows her to wake up. Now, this may be slightly different than tellings that you might remember, and certainly different than the Disney telling, because it's not a true love's kiss. In the original Grimm's version of the story, and even in the older folkloric versions, there wasn't a true love's kiss. It was a piece of apple lodged in her throat, and once the apple was dislodged, she was able to go right ahead and wake up. There are, of course, some other darker variants. I just wanted to go off the Grimm's version because the Grimm's version is plenty dark. And why do I say that she could have been vampiric based on the elements of this story? Well, first of all, we have her, it's not really a Snow White thing, it's not her herself, but her stepmother was requesting the heart and the liver because she wanted to eat them. Obviously, this is consumption of human flesh and human blood, so that is vampiric, but it's also cannibalistic. So you automatically have this note of that kind of macabre, dark element right there in that fact. When Snow White's mother was pregnant with her, which is where the story begins, the very beginning of the story, she accidentally pricks her finger and a little bit of blood falls onto a windowsill that is made of ebony, and it's snowing outside. And the mother thinks to herself, I would love to have a daughter with skin as white as the snow, lips as red as the blood, and hair as black as ebony. And she gets that. Her daughter does look like this. And she's utterly beautiful. And that description, though, isn't that kind of a classic vampiric look? You know, very pale skin, very dark hair, blood red lips, almost as if you've been drinking blood. So that right there is an inciting incident. And it also tells you, well, her mother dies when she's very young, and she never has a stepmother, and her father dies under mysterious circumstances, usually written off as the evil queen has killed him. But in alternate tellings, like in Neil Gaiman's telling, it was actually Snow White who killed him. So we have this very dark energy with that. And is she necessarily an evil vampire? Well, no, she could be a good vampire, and it still could be her running from her wicked stepmother, her, the evil queen, while still maintaining a vampiric side to her. The second point to make about Snow White herself in a vampiric realm is the beauty, that otherworldly, ethereal beauty she's said to possess. Now, yes, I know if we're going with older folkloric vampires, they were not beautiful. They were essentially bloated, ruddy, rotting corpses that were alive and drinking blood. There's a lot of crossover with vampires and zombies in the folkloric sense, except zombies tended to lack the intellect. Vampires had intellect to them, but moving more into the literary sense, because the Grimm's brothers were writing in the 1800s, and that is the same era when we were getting the great vampire fiction and literary stories coming to us. So we're going to take the more literary vampire. They are attractive, they're beautiful, and they have this ethereal, otherworldly beauty to them. And she definitely fits the bill there. She fits the bill by having this charming charisma about her. She is able to easily charm these 7 dwarves into letting her live with them. And it's not given a lot of knowledge of why. I mean, they find her sleeping in their house, and it should be this very disconcerting, creepy thing. And they should chase her out. I mean, in Goldilocks, the bears chase her out. She runs away. It's this, intrusion. But with the with the Snow White tale, we have them inviting her to stay after this. So to me, this could be vampiric compulsion, glamour, hypnosis, mind control, however you want to phrase it. That to me is a symbol is symbolic of that kind of vampiric mind control power that is prevalent in vampire lore, or at least vampire fiction. And finally, it is that death-like sleep. The fact that it was so hard, it was damn hard for the evil queen to kill her in the first place. She had to try different methods before the apple got stuck in her throat. The fact that she was hard to kill puts her in the vampire camp. The fact that when she did go into that death-like sleep, or that death paralysis, or whatever it may have been, she didn't start to decay at all. She didn't start to decompose. She just looked ethereally lovely, beautiful, like she was sleeping. And they put her in a glass coffin. The coffin itself is another vampiric staple. And they stared at her because she was so lovely. And then we have this prince who, let's face it, has a little bit of a necrophilic side to him. Little bit of necrophilic tendency there, buddy. I want this beautiful, seemingly dead girl. I want her. So I am going to convince you to let me take her. I'm going to bribe you, and you're going to let me take her with me. But then, of course, she rises. She rises from a nearly death-like sleep. What do vampires do if not rise and come out of their coffins? She literally rises and literally comes out of a coffin. This isn't like Sleeping Beauty, which, shout out to my little Aurora figurine in the background there. It's not Sleeping Beauty where she's just like in this bed and in a castle and shrouded by thorns. This is Snow White literally in a glass coffin and then gets kissed awake. Or in the Grimm tale, the apple gets dislodged and she's allowed to wake. Like I said, there's a reason why other people have thought of this story as one that's possibly symbolic of vampirism, and I have to say, the more I think about it, the more I think it's a really valid interpretation. Not that I don't like a straight interpretation of it. I do love this tale of Snow White. It is a favorite of mine. It's in my top 5 favorite fairy tales, and it's high up there. It's just a really interesting story. And it lends itself really well to alternate interpretations, including the vampire one we're talking about today. And alternate, like, just creepy interpretations, too, like in Snow White, A Tale of Terror. This is such a great movie. It's not really a well-known film so much, unless you're into specifically fairy tale cinematic adaptations. It's Sigourney Weaver, and Sam Neill plays one of the major male roles. That's why they're listed up top. But it's actually Monica Keena who plays the Snow White character. I don't know. Right there. And I want to note that Monica Keena, who plays the Snow White character in this movie, was also the main character in Freddy vs. Jason. So she would go on to have a bit of a Scream Queen career after this, which kind of links back to my horror Snow White thing. And that brings us to the end of this video. Now, I hope that you've enjoyed. If you have, please do like, comment, subscribe. Check out my blog, roseofavalon.life, and pop over to my Discord and join my Discord server. It'll be in the description box below. And if you're ever interested, I do stream on Twitch, usually about once a week, and it is Avalon Enchant at twitch.tv. So please support my channel if you like my content, and check out my other content. I do post new blog posts every single day, and starting tomorrow will be my Gothic Romance Week for 2022, because I do have a Gothic Romance Week every single year for the week leading up to Halloween. So have a very fabulous, morbid, and macabre Monday.